Ooh, okay. EJ Speed to the Houston Texans. I'll tell you what, there's a lot on that from a discussion standpoint about the team. Maybe not in terms of wins and losses for the Colts or the Texans per se, but in terms of pure Colts discussion, there's kind of a few ways to approach that one. Now, me personally, I grew up a WWE fan, so I kind of like the drama behind it, the rivalry that comes with the idea of a player going to a division rival. That type of thing I just geek out for. And do keep in mind, there's a very real possibility that the primary reason that EJ Speed is not with the Indianapolis Colts going into next season is because of the podcast with Zaire Franklin known as The Trenches. Like, you think about this idea that last season guys were just ultimately too comfortable with the Indianapolis Colts and that dudes didn't really feel enough of a fire under their ass to come out and really cement themselves as fixtures on this roster. There was no better display, no example of that was so strictly and outwardly in our face, like the way that EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin spoke on that podcast. Now, in terms of it being like a hatred for the Indianapolis Colts as a result of that, him going to the Texans, I'm not really sure if that's the case. Like, I don't think he's trying to stick it to the Colts. He's born and raised in Texas, went to college at Tarleton State, which is in Texas. So Houston makes sense from that standpoint. But at the same time, you can't help but wonder what those matchups are going to look like when you have EJ Speed on one side of the ball and the Indianapolis Colts on the other side of the ball. Like, is EJ Speed going to get chippy? Is there a little resentment? Does he kind of have that chip on his shoulder? If he had opinions about guys on the roster, a la an Anthony Richardson, right? All the stuff that circulates about him and his work ethic or lack thereof or whatever it is that was going on in that locker room last offseason, like, does EJ Speed look at the Texans not only as an opportunity to return home, but also does he get a sick kick out of the idea that he can go there and, show the Colts, hey, not only can I produce, I can do it for a team that's beating your ass, You just can't help but wonder if that's a thing and the type of entertainment that may provide on the field. Now, on the other hand, on the more practical side of things, as it relates to this offseason for the Colts, EJ Speed being gone is just another thing that brings attention to the fact that the Colts need a linebacker and they need one bad. And it's not only the fact that EJ Speed is gone, it's Grant Stewart as well. Remember, now he went to the Detroit Lions, along with the fact that the Colts have brought nobody else in to help at that position. Like, even without the idea of EJ Speed and Grant Stewart being gone, a lot of us were looking at the linebacker room and saying, hey, it would be nice to have an upgrade here, or at least competition at the level of the guys that we have to ultimately raise the level of play in this room. Because a lot of you guys are going to say that EJ Speed is a scrub or something to that effect. EJ Speed, you can do worse than EJ Speed at linebacker. He's by no means the best linebacker in the league, but he's certainly not your worst possible option as a starter. So there's no technical guarantee that the Colts would upgrade from an EJ Speed. And at this point in the offseason, you do look and say, well, okay, you have Zaire Franklin. You know what he brings to the table, at least most of us do, as kind of a downhill, kind of get guys at the line of scrimmage type of dude. Maybe not dude in pass coverage that you want out there, but if you just let Zaire Franklin go downhill, that is an impact player. And I will keep pointing to it, even if number 100, a PFF top 100 player, I like Zaire Franklin. I am Team Zaire, personally. Okay, you're, of course, entitled to your own opinion. You have a guy in Sagan Olabi who is a hard hitter. He's a bruiser. He's going to go out there. He's going to make contact. But we don't know about his ability as a starter. Jalen Carlies, or Carlies, I don't know how to pronounce it, but last year, rookie, safety, converted down to linebacker, does project to be solid as a pass coverage type of guy. And I thought when he was actually active and on the field, of course, he ended up injured. I thought he was okay out there, but ultimately, there's certainly not enough guys on this roster right now at the linebacker position for Indy to confidently roll into the season with. And you'd almost have to assume at this point that the draft will certainly involve a linebacker early in this, in the draft, which would be first round, second round, one of those two. If not, you're kind of in a really, really tough spot at linebacker unless you just absolutely know something for sure that we don't about the guys that you have on roster, or you hit on a draft pick in a way that is, one of Chris Ballard's all-time best picks. I mean, if you get your starter in round 3 or later, more power to you. I mean, it's either a draft pick in the first or second round, or maybe there's Jermaine Pratt of the Bengals. Obviously, he has familiarity with Smooth Lou in the defensive scheme. Maybe there's a trade involving him. I know his name's gotten tossed around. A Quincy Williams from the New York Jets, but really not all that many options outside of a couple of options for trade and an early pick in the draft at the linebacker position. Let alone the fact that I think you should probably draft one in the mid rounds as well. But there's no question, no matter how it is that you think the Colts should solve the problem, this is a glaring need to at least add more competition to this room, if not make a huge splash entirely. So it's a situation that we're going to have to continue to monitor, talk about, and be honest with ourselves within this offseason and going into the season. You do wonder, in a move like this, where EJ Speed is gone, Grant Stewart gone, no one else brought in, everyone talking about tight end in round 1, and plenty of people talking about Jihad Campbell too. But is Jihad Campbell, does this kind of push him to be the odds-on favorite for that pick at number 14, particularly if they're looking and trading for a Dallas Goedert, like I think they're going to do? Seems like a draft day move, right? So if you're in round 1 and you draft a Jihad Campbell, and then you're in round 2 and you're saying, let's see if our tight end falls, he doesn't. Well, okay, if there's no one you like, that's when you could turn your attention to trading for a Dallas Goedert, who's really not going to cost any more than a 5th or 6th round pick for the Indianapolis Colts. At this point, the Eagles have now brought in 3 different tight ends this offseason, one of which being Kylan Granson. While Goddard has an expiring contract, they're known to do extensions early. You have guys on the defensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles, all signs pointing to the fact that the Eagles are going to part ways with Dallas Goedert in some capacity. I think the Colts are a primary player in that. So sure, Tyler Warren and Colton Loveland, these are guys that everyone's talking about, the Mason Taylors of the world. Well, not for anything. Dallas Goedert, trade option. You don't have to spend one of your top 2 picks on him. Perhaps that's the better route if you could go get a linebacker and something else you feel you need in round 2. We'll have to see. But as of right now, the reality, which is absolutely the worst part of the offseason, but also the best part of the offseason to some degree because you get to speculate quite a bit, is we don't have the answers. We want them. Lord knows we want the answers, but we can't have them. And that applies to all positions. And there's no position that it hurts more to have that dilemma in than at the quarterback position. Now, if I'm to shift the topic, right? How do you like that transition from me? We can talk all we want about the job that Indianapolis and Chris Ballard have done this offseason. And in my opinion, it's been a real good one. I mean, you're talking about a roster right now that ultimately made 3 moves. Like, sure, you have the Khalil Herberts and the Neville Gallimores, okay, whatever the heck his name is on the defensive line. No disrespect, I'll learn it at some point, brother, but, play a couple snaps for the team, and then I'll really take it all that seriously, okay? But you have Charvarius Ward, Cam Bynum, and Daniel freaking Jones. And those 3 moves took a fan base that was primarily doom and gloom to one that is feeling quite a bit better about the prospects of this team. And it does make you look back at the roster we had this past season and just question, how bad was it actually? Like, was the roster really that bad? Is the way this team constructed actually that bad? Or is it just that they're missing some key pieces? Now, of course, they still have work to do, and they obviously have to play the damn games come September, and we're a very long way away from that point. But right now, you look at the work that this roster needs going into next season, and it's work that you can reasonably expect to be done over the course of this offseason. As we just talked about, linebacker, one of them, and tight end, of course. A little bit of depth on the offensive line, maybe another running back in the draft, right? Bing, bang, boom. At that point, you're talking about a Colts roster that not only is pretty good, but on paper actually has really no glaring holes. Now, of course, that brings us back to quarterback, because that hole that we would have with the roster, with everything I just said, is at that quarterback position, potentially the uncertainty in the most important position in the game of football when you're talking about one guy that dictates the difference between wins and losses. So that's going to be a big thing for the Indianapolis Colts. And listen, the team right now, here's a little food for thought, okay? Because when I say that type of thing, I think you have 2 sects of the Colts weird. You have two different segments of the Colts fan base, right? You have the side that would say that the Colts failed Anthony Richardson and that they don't have what they need in place for him to succeed. And then you'd have the other side that maybe actually watch the football games. Kidding, kind of. You have the other side of things saying, hey, not for anything. Anthony Richardson has to hold up his end of the bargain here, okay? And here's the food for thought. And then for those of you who are saying the Colts didn't give Richardson what he needed, I'm curious if you change your mind here, okay? Right now, we look at the Indianapolis Colts roster and we think to ourselves, if Anthony Richardson, and sorry, because I have allergies, I'm kind of picking at my nose here a little bit, right? Audio listeners, like, what the heck is going on? Back to business. If this roster right now, if Anthony Richardson was to step up his game, really give us above average quarterback play next season, you're looking at a team that can challenge the Houston Texans for their first AFC South title, the Indianapolis Colts, that is, since 2013. And that's with above average quarterback play from Anthony Richardson. But now let's flip that around. If you put Anthony Richardson on the Houston Texans and you put CJ Stroud on the Colts, would there be any conversation at all about who is going to win the AFC South? Or would the Colts, despite Anthony Richardson being above average for the Texans, let's say, in that situation, in that bizarro world, would anyone even be talking about anyone but the Colts in the division? Okay. And be honest. Be honest when you answer that question. Because I think when you're honest with that, you do look and say, oh, damn, this does come down to Anthony Richardson. And I bring that up to you because, one, it tells you the truth about where the roster is at. But then, two, again, as I just said, it speaks to the importance that Anthony Richardson holds in this equation. He is the key to the Colts season. All the work they're doing, all the roster construction, the new coaching staff, everything that they're trying to do to improve this team, and the Colts are going all in trying to improve this team right now. None of it matters if either one of these quarterbacks, of course, Anthony Richardson is the one that all of us want it to be. It doesn't matter if they don't come out and get it done. And the likelihood is that if the Colts this year don't make the wild card, you're going to be able to look at primarily the quarterback position and nothing else. Like, that's the way this team is positioned right now. And I don't want you guys to miss that side of things. Now, as I said, until the games are played, we don't have the answers. What's the, you remember Kanye West on Sway in the Morning? You ain't got the answers, Sway. I've been doing this more than you. I've been doing this more than you. You ain't got the answers. That's us. We're Sway. We don't have the answers, okay? But what we do have are clues, right? We have clues, and the reality right now with the clues that I see when it comes to Anthony Richardson, they unfortunately point to an ugly truth about him, or at least an ugly truth about the Colts' level of optimism in him, or lack thereof. And we're going to get into that. But before we do, you know what it is? I got to introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching and enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We're on the quest to 4,000 subscribers over here on the YouTube channel. We want to get there by the start of next season. So far, the growth over this offseason has been encouraging. We're not particularly close to 4,000, but if you keep coming back, enjoying the content, or perhaps it's your first day here and you're enjoying what it is that you're hearing, perhaps today's the day, but no pressure at all. I'm going to be here talking about this team for as long as humanly possible. I'm going to be 80 years old being like, hey, remember Anthony Richardson? That's going to be me. That is going to be me. Audio listeners, leave a five-star review. Let the people know how much you're enjoying the show. Audio is a side that we want to grow. Most importantly, be civil in the comment section. You don't know what the person on the other side of the keyboard is going through today. We want to raise the level of discussion about the Indianapolis Colts, not degrade it into name calling and insults. We want everyone to feel like their opinion could be shared here, even if not everyone always has the best opinion. Take it as an opportunity to educate them, not tear them down, okay? There's enough factors in this world tearing people down. Let's be a community. We're all rooting for the same thing, and that is the success of the Indianapolis Colts. But now back to business. Before we even get into all of the things that I feel are signs that the Colts aren't all that confident in Anthony Richardson, I'm going to let you know what they are, so you're kind of not sitting here left waiting as to what they are, okay? And then I'll elaborate on each one. Number one, and most important, not most importantly, just most obviously, the signing of Daniel Jones. Big deal. Maybe not for the reasons that you think, but a big deal. Number two, Ryan Kelly's comments in his virtual media session being introduced to the Minnesota Vikings media, I thought were very, very telling. I may be reaching, but I thought there was a lot to take away from that. Number 3, and this one's going to get a couple of your panties in a bunch. The way Pat McAfee speaks about Anthony Richardson, I take no pride in saying it. I think it matters. I just think it matters, okay? And number 4, Sam Ehlinger and his departure to the Broncos, coupled with number 5, which is Quinn Ewers as a top 30 visit for the Indianapolis Colts, meaning they have a level of interest bringing him in. And then 6, which may not be intuitive, but I'll try to bring the case back around, their aggressive approach this offseason to bringing in talent, I think does not bode well for what I would perceive to be their confidence in Anthony Richardson. I think all of these things point to a lack of confidence in his ability to move them forward and be the franchise quarterback. Not saying that he can't get it done, but what I am saying is that this is my takeaway based off of these actions and the behavior of the Indianapolis Colts. So of all those things, I don't even know if I'm going to go in order or not, but let's start with Ryan Kelly. Not sure if you listened to what he had to say, okay, but there was a lot of telling stuff in there. The 2 biggest takeaways for me from Ryan Kelly's media availability was that he, one, said he is the type of guy that envisioned himself as someone who would play in one place for his entire career. But contrary to that, he also indicated that going into the 2023 season, he was uncertain about his future with the Indianapolis Colts, and then furthered that point, kind of doubled down on that sentiment, and said that he knew he'd be leaving Indy for around a year and a half before it actually happened this offseason. And even though he made sure to point out there was not one specific thing that led to that decision, you can't help but look at that timeline, which perfectly aligns with Anthony Richardson getting drafted, him getting to know who Anthony Richardson was, and then gauging the likelihood that Anthony Richardson would be the guy to finally stop the quarterback carousel for the Indianapolis Colts. And you couple that with the fact that, again, he considers himself the type of guy that wants to stay in one place. You can't help but deduce from those 2 things colliding with one another that perhaps what he saw from Anthony Richardson, both on and off the field, played a major role in his decision to move on from the team. Now, next, Daniel Jones. I know quite a few fans look at Daniel Jones and say that this guy stinks, and that they put on their rose-colored glasses like Anthony Richardson is all that much better, and talk about how Daniel Jones couldn't possibly be real competition for Anthony Richardson, when in actuality, the evidence is very much there that he could be. It just is a hard pill to swallow for us as Colts fans, okay? And I will say it once to you, I will say it again. Chris Ballard, of all the things you may not like about him, he will never, ever lie to you. He tells you the truth. That's why you don't like him. Like when he says, we like our guys, the reason that pisses everyone off so much is because he's telling you the truth. We like our guys. He doesn't bring in competition, and then we know how the story ends, okay? Chris Ballard's the type of guy that's going to be as honest as possible. Shane Steichen himself also said that they are going to be, from the start of OTAs, from the start of offseason program, they are going to be splitting those first team reps, Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. The Colts, no matter how much you don't want to listen, are telling you straight up how good, or how not good really, they think Anthony Richardson is at this point in time as an NFL quarterback. The fact that they truly believe, and they do, that the guy in Daniel Jones, a guy rather, of Daniel Jones's caliber is good enough to challenge Anthony Richardson and potentially take his spot. The fact that they view him as legitimate competition tells you everything you need to know about their confidence in Anthony Richardson right now. Plain and simple. Pat McAfee, next. Polarizing dude amongst Colts fans, of course, with all the things he said about Anthony Richardson. And my opinion on that is kind of twofold. It does kind of, to some degree, disappoint me, is maybe not the right word, but it doesn't sit very well with me that Pat's the only guy in the mainstream media that really makes anyone interested in the Indianapolis Colts. And he kind of has an opportunity to lift the team up, and instead uses his platform to do it the way he does it. But at the same time, you do have to look at the other side of things and say, listen, Pat's show has become a safe space for players in all sports. Like, he's the show that players want to go on and get an interview on. He's the guy getting LeBron James. He's the guy getting Aaron Rodgers on the bi-weekly basis. Pat McAfee is the guy that all the players want to talk to, and it's because of the fact that he tries to give them a fair chance. He lets them tell their side of the story, and he's always going to try to view things as half full. Like, he doesn't have an agenda. He's not trying to pull guys down for no reason, okay? The only time he has not had that approach is particularly this past season with the Indianapolis Colts, and more specifically with Anthony Richardson. It's the only time since I've known about Pat McAfee's show, which has been from the very start, from when he was with Barstool, the only time I have seen him use his platform in a way that doesn't give the players a fair shake. Like, he seems awfully confident in what it is that he's saying about Anthony Richardson, saying things like, and I'm paraphrasing him, of course, that the more Colts fans learn about him, the less optimistic they're going to be about his future as their quarterback. And then you had Dan Orlovsky. I'm not sure if you saw this. He came on the show and claimed that he had sources, he being Dan Orlovsky, had sources inside the Colts building that actually spoke highly of Anthony Richardson's work ethic, which, if you looked at Pat's face when he said that, his head almost exploded. And he literally accused Orlovsky of making that up. So you do have to look and say, you wonder if that level of confidence, like, what do you think is more likely from Pat McAfee? That he feels that, given the same information we have, like, he saw the tap out, he saw the benching, he heard the things that players were saying in the mainstream media and kind of the stuff that circulated around, the news, the sports news, that he saw that and nothing else and has this opinion, or that he saw that and knows things that we do not know from sources he has in the building and has this opinion as a result of both things. If you're being fair, when I asked you that question, you'd have to at least concede that the latter of those two things is more likely. Now, and by the way, like, this is like a negative Anthony Richardson episode. You take it however you want, okay? I'm literally coming to you, unfortunately, and just telling you what I see to be the truth. I'm a truth teller, and many times people have said, okay, we love your optimism, Justin, but the optimism was always just me telling you the truth. So now in this moment, when I'm pessimistic, it's just me telling you the truth. It's always the truth. It's never optimistic. It's never pessimistic. It's what I view as the truth. That's what we do over here. On to Sam Ehlinger and Quinn Ewers. Now, I know what you guys may be thinking when I bring this up. Well, listen, Sam Ehlinger, just a third string quarterback, and Quinn Ewers, just a top 30 visit quarterback. Like, there's really not all that much to see there. It's not like they're going to be drafting a quarterback in the first round or something like that. Well, the reason in my eyes that this is such a big deal is that the Colts last season did not have a quarterback as a top 30 visit, meaning that something has fundamentally changed in the way they view Anthony Richardson from last season, from last offseason to this offseason. And if that hadn't changed, then they would not have a quarterback as a top 30 visit. And you do look at a guy like Sam Ehlinger and say, okay, he was never going to be the guy here, but at the same time has been incredibly serviceable as our third string guy, has been a fixture for the Indianapolis Colts. Well, you get rid of Joe Flacco, you get rid of Sam Ehlinger, you get Daniel Jones, who at least in theory can be viewed as a potential option for the future for the Indianapolis Colts. You say, okay, they're looking at Quinn Ewers now too. Do they view him as a potential option long-term, or at least one that they could have as a high-end developmental backup? The idea is that, okay, last year Anthony Richardson was the only guy that had a chance to be the future of the Indianapolis Colts. You go into this offseason and you have Richardson. In theory, you have a Daniel Jones, and then potentially a Quinn Ewers coming in, or at least that third spot on the roster open for a guy that they draft and bring in. So I don't know if that is like the truth of the matter, but I'm telling you that's what I view as the truth of the matter. And then at that point, it would make sense if my next takeaway is true, which is the way they're handling this offseason, the way they're going all in my opinion. I look at Chris Ballard, I look at Shane Steichen, who are the two guys that are connected right now to Anthony Richardson from a job security perspective. I believe they're looking at that Anthony Richardson situation going into this season and bracing for impact. They're trying to come up with a contingency plan. Now, with that being said, the reality is that if Anthony Richardson comes out and wets the bed for the Indianapolis Colts next year, it would likely mean that they're both out of a job. Not guaranteed, but could very well mean they're both out of a job. Unless, of course, they showed that there was urgency in their pursuit to win. You know how much that means to the man upstairs in Jim Irsay. So if they have put themselves in a position, or if they put themselves in a position where the roster is so good on paper that the only way it could fail is through bad QB play, I think the way they've approached this offseason, of course, they would like to have Anthony Richardson figure it out and win that job and become the QB of the future. But I think right now they look and they say, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. If both of those guys fail, you go into next year with another crack at it in a strong quarterback class with a roster that on some level you could argue is ready to compete and build right now. So if you draft Quinn Ewers, okay, you lose Richardson and Jones. Not saying you literally lose Richardson. He'd be under roster, although at that point he would probably be traded. Of course, now I'm thinking into next offseason. But now you'd be able to reset that quarterback position and, you know, you can go 500 with poor quarterback play. Like if this year you go 500 with poor quarterback play and it's clearly the quarterback that's the reason you're not in the playoffs, the case could be made from Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard that you're just the right piece away. And you look at a team like the Denver Broncos with Bo Nix as an example, or what Jaden Daniels is able to come in and do in Washington. And I think Steichen and Ballard are starting now trying to build that case in the case that Anthony Richardson does not work out, which I personally feel based off their actions, they don't think he will. Because keep in mind, the completion percentage, the ability to consistently move the offense, the ability to go out there and look like a guy that you can trust to start week to week in terms of consistency of play from Anthony Richardson. Him overcoming that at this point is like not all that likely. Even if he did overcome that, you're talking about the fact that he can't stay on the field. So at that point, you put those two things together. Unfortunately, it's like a 5 to 10% chance based off no numbers. Those are arbitrary numbers, okay? So, bear with me. A 5 to 10% chance that this dude is the future of the Indianapolis Colts. I think the Colts are showing in their actions that they know that to be true. And that's the bottom line because Justin from the Riding the Bench podcast said so. So my name was Justin. This was the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. In fact, my name is Justin, and this is the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. Like, subscribe if you have not yet. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. And as always, go Colts.